growing up, the only poverty I ever saw were some of the families in this town. We moved here in 1969, and this is the basis for everything for me and my family. And the only poverty I saw were some of the families in town. The issues of suffering that I was subjected to were actually contained within my family circles, the people I knew, the things they were going through, their issues. My mother would leave an extra plate out at dinner time for, I believe, a long time, one of your best friends, right, Joey? Who would just show up, and it was not uncommon for somebody just to come in off the street, a neighborhood kid, sit down, and it wasn't weird to me, but they would just start eating. I can remember occasions growing up when I was a youngster that people would come over, and I would be ushered out of the room where the parents were talking, and they would shut the door, and I can remember hearing on the other side anguish and tears, and I can remember piecing together as they were in the den that there was some tragedy, and they'd come to my parents for help, and my parents were maybe even financially helping them out with a child who had been incarcerated or an issue that they needed help with. It wasn't uncommon. At First Baptist Church, where I grew up, which is now the Hope Center, when I was very young, I can remember going to Awana. I went to Awanas. I went to vacation Bible schools. I've talked about the procession of the flags in that sweaty building. I can remember going from that to Royal Ambassadors, where we would do woodworking with Mr. Presley and things. And I can remember, though, here's the deal, though. Every one of those were actually being led by men and women within First Baptist Church. Not a very big church, but every one of those were led by men and women who were picking us up. Mr. Presley had that Grand Torino, and he would pick us up and take us to First Baptist Church and bring me home. I can remember that. I can remember growing up in the 70s and the 80s, and I can tell you that in Sweet Home, and this is still the case today, that in Sweet Home, Oregon in the 70s and 80s, and you guys can attest to this, that there was never a reason for a child in Sweet Home to go without sports. Never. That it was common. We knew that if you didn't have the money for a sport, and it's still true, by the way. In fact, I'll tell you that. Talk to me. We'll make sure it happens, because I still know those families. But nobody went without that in my circle that I knew. Families didn't go without. That people would gather around them. And this isn't some romanticized version of the way it was. It's just the way it was. That dads in sporting seasons would pick up kids in droves to make sure they would go to the Little League field, to make sure they were at the practice, to make sure they were taken care of. And I'm going to be honest with you. I'm going to give you an opportunity at some point in this message to be mad at me. I'm going to give you an opportunity to be offended, very offended at me. But only if you add words to what you think I'm saying and not what I'm saying. If you add what I think he's insinuating, man, absolutely, you will be angry with me. But I will say this, before we go into that, I can tell you this, I never had any idea of anybody's political view in town. I didn't. I didn't know what people thought. I didn't know their political views. I'm sure that growing up, some people voted for Ford, some people voted for Carter, some people voted for Reagan. Nobody voted for Mondale. But anyway, historical joke, right? But I'm sure people voted differently in our little town. But you know what I don't recall? I don't recall it ever dividing us. I don't recall it ever being the thing that made my parents or the parents of my friends decide whose family they were going to support, what child they were going to enable to have opportunities. I don't remember any of that. I don't remember the way that we were divided as being something that actually divided us. But times have changed. You see, with the advent of technology, we are constantly bombarded with reports of happenings around the globe. It's no longer just this idea of I know only the suffering in Sweet Home, only the stuff at Oak Heights, the junior high, the high school. Now we are exposed to suffering. We're exposed to evil at its most widespread. We have tendrils of evil everywhere, and we are exposed to it with the advent of technology constantly. So much so that the scope and magnitude, and yeah, my voice is getting dry, so stick with me. So much so that the scope and the magnitude of the problem sometimes don't they almost seem insurmountable? Don't they almost just seem like I got to get away from this. It's too much for me. Everywhere I turn, it's always with us. In fact, I would say this. It's not just the awareness of the issues at a global level that just bombard us. It's also this constant bombardment with the issues that drive the issues. With 24-hour television, with 24-hour social media, with talking heads everywhere, everybody is telling us why things are happening. Is that not true? Everybody has an opinion about everything. So much so that all of us tend to become kind of experts, aren't we? Come on now, this is where you're going to get mad at me if you add what I'm going to say. We're all experts. I mean, the Middle East, I think I could solve it. I could get a good crack at it, right? I've watched enough Fox. I've watched enough CNN. I've watched enough MSNBC. By the way, my brother's laughing. He knows I've not watched any of those. But I think I could solve the Middle East crisis, right, you guys? What about this? Racism? Or systemic racism? I mean, I don't know what that is, but I bet you have an opinion. I bet you have an opinion. Now, you may think, oh, Don's bad-mouthing my... No, I'm not. No, I'm just saying. Racism, systemic racism, I bet you have an opinion. I bet you have an opinion on the oversight or defunding or enforcing gun laws or defunding police. I bet you have an opinion. I bet. Well, listen, cop's wife. We all assume we know your opinion. Cop's son. I have probably the same one. But we all have an opinion. What about things like this? Economic disparities, taxation policies, the science or lack thereof of a global pandemic. I bet you have an opinion. I bet you do. I bet you have one. The science, the Constitution. I didn't realize how deep the Constitution, when our forefathers put it together, dealt with our ability or inability to be forced to wear masks. But it's in there. The Constitution, mask mandates. See, some of you are like, I think I know his opinion. Probably only if you know me. But even then, I'll be honest. Somebody asked me the other day why I don't share my opinion more. You guys should not show up here to hear Don Knight's opinion. You guys get that? You should hopefully show up to hear Scripture, right? I am telling you, and on any of this stuff, so I want to be very clear. Before I go on, because I know some of you, no matter how many warnings I give you, you're still going to leave and not get it. I don't want to put a barrier up. I believe that there are scriptural imperatives, there are ethical sides, moral sides to arguments. I believe in good and evil. I do. I do believe they're important. But here's when to keep going, though. Trump, Donald Trump, Kate Brown, Joe Biden, Florida, Idaho, transgender, LGBTQ, ABC. I bet. Oh, I'm on my second round. Who gave you that?
Granny. It's meant from your mom.
My mother? You know what? Let's just get out of here. I'm sick of all of you. I changed my opinion about a few of you a minute ago. Mother, I really can't have a mint in my mouth when I'm talking. This is splash zone right here. I'll keep working at it. You guys, here we go. And here's the deal, though. And this is what I want you guys to get. It's not just that everyone, myself included, in this 24-hour bombardment of everything, it's not just that everyone has an opinion now on everything. It's not just that everyone seems to want to share it. And look, who do we deal with when we come in here? The one in your seat. You understand what I'm saying? That's all we're talking to. I'm talking to me. We all want to share our knowledge because we are the experts, because we have heard all the research on everything. We know we could solve it if they just listened to us. But here's what's happened. Two very important things have happened societally due to the, and I have it as a slide, I'm sure, due to the proliferation and weaponization of information. Get that? I worked really hard on that, right? Two very important things, and these are society things. Sociologists will tell you this. Two very important things have happened societally due to the proliferation. It's all over the place. And honestly, have you guys understood the weaponization of information? The weaponization. First is this. Many people have withdrawn from the actual work of clothing and feeding our neighbors. Think about that. Growing up, my neighbors is what I saw. My neighbors are the people my parents took care of. We do the busing ministries in town to go get kids from areas to make sure they were here. And I'm not saying good, bad, or indifferent, but I'm saying first thing sociologists will tell you, with the proliferation and the weaponization of information, many people have withdrawn from the actual work of clothing and feeding our neighbors and taking care of the widows and orphans. Remember, Mark Twain once said, maybe we shouldn't worry so much about the scriptures we don't understand and focus on the ones we do. Take care of the widows and the orphans. And many people instead, and you guys, this is the first point. I may actually offend you, but that's okay, because this one's true. Instead, people have relegated, given up, abdicated the actual taking care of their neighbor, making sure widows and orphans are taken care of, and instead soothe themselves by becoming social justice warriors on social media. Just true. Platforms. I'll say that again. They've given up the actual work of taking care of the widows and the orphans in your neighborhood, taking care of the kids in our town, and instead soothe themselves by becoming social justice warriors on social media platforms. What they do is, and this is where I could care less what you think, this is absolutely true. In so doing, substituting awareness for actual action. Substituting awareness for actual involvement in people's pains. Had somebody very recently that we know and love die of cancer. She told my wife that whole wear a pink thing, she used more colorful language than I do. Her point was it does nothing for her. Now, I'm not against it, but I'm just saying if the only action we have toward people we know who are suffering through a disease like cancer in our own midst is to wear a pink shirt and feel good about it, that is not what we're called to do. And I could go on, but I won't because we want to get to a barbecue. Second thing that's happened with the weaponization, the proliferation of information is this. I said it earlier, we've just become divided. Can we just agree with that? We've become divided. And I'm talking about us. Us. Let's not think we're all in here all in the same boat. When I was giving those ideas about we all have an opinion, do you realize you might be seated next to somebody with a drastically different opinion than you do? You get that? And what's happened is we become divided because we know now. We know who's with me, and we know who's on the other side. And this is indeed tribalism at its most toxic. Tribalism. Tribalism is this idea that I must defend my tribe's borders, my tribe's powers. And in a world where technology links me today, I made a comment about who I was following Josh Bondo, and I just posted on Facebook something he said about a Blazer trade, that we should go after Jaylen Brown. And somebody goes, I wouldn't give up Jaylen Brown for C.J. McCollum on Facebook. And I thought, I don't know that person. So I clicked on their link, and I'm having a conversation without even knowing it with a gentleman in Boston. Like that. And you would think our world has become bigger, but our tribes have not become bigger with technology, people. Instead, they've become actually smaller. They've become smaller because we now know how many differing opinions are being loudly shouted at us, so we must defend our tribe, my tribe's borders, my tribe's rights. And we begin within the church. Woo. Puberty, mother! Yes. Sorry. We begin within the church not to prioritize Christ. And I want you to think about that. The church, believers, and you in your own seat, we begin in our lives not to prioritize Christ, but instead to idolize our tribe's agendas, our tribe's thoughts. In fact, I would say this, simple test. What do you give your heart to? You can deal with that sound we'll fix on the video. We said in here, when you hear your heart in the Bible, it says the thoughts you have, the emotions those thoughts create, and then the actions those emotions give birth to. I would ask you, what do you give your heart to? What do you think about most? What stirs your emotions more? What actions do you take? Are they more often towards spreading the joy, the love, the absolute world-changing, life-altering grace of God, love of Christ, or is it spent over your tribe's preferences? Arguing, defending, angry about. I'll leave that for you guys, but I can tell you this. I know that we tend to think that this is somehow new, that somehow with the proliferation of weaponization, I would say this, the dangers of technology are new, but the concepts are not. And so I just want to take a look at a story as we continue our study of John. We're still in the Bible here. We're not just going to hear my thoughts. We're going to look at this. And some of these issues are at play, and you can even see it in the first century in Jerusalem. You see, to bring you up to date, Jesus has just made a statement about himself during this festival of the booths. And you can go back and look at this, but this is what he said. He said that he was the light of the world. And I think it's fitting to say again, because a lot of us mess up, especially if we're doing what I said. We're pursuing our tribes, our preference. Our passion is for our preference and not to pursue our purpose, which is found in God. If that's us, I'll just say again, that Jesus, when he said that he was the light of the world, was not, he said, his point was not that he came to deliver the people by eliminating the darkness around them. You realize that's what they all thought. They all thought messianic prophecy, they thought, was the Messiah, the promised one, would come, and he would set them free from Rome, from bondage, that all the darkness around them would be eliminated. And Jesus came with this radical message. He said, no, that's not it. His plan to deliver them, to deliver us, would be instead to illuminate, shine a light on the darkness within us. That it actually starts, the transformation of the world, the expansion of the borders of the kingdom of heaven, which Jesus said came at his arrival, start in your seat, not the one to the left, not the one to the right, and not with Kate or Donald. That it starts with us. So, that's what he said. The religious leaders, however, though, that's not what they wanted. The religious leaders and most of the people hated him for that. I need to say that again. Jesus was walking with people following him, thousands of people. And then he made some statements they didn't like, and quickly, and you'll realize this, in fact, I would say many of us have had this or seen it with people, that we come in and we think God, his job, Jesus came to make us comfortable. We somehow are told that Jesus came to make our lives great, and then we don't just check out and go, wait a minute, when that's not true. Many of us discard Christ, hate our faith, hate our religion because it was a lie. That is not what Jesus came to do, was to make all of my physical comforts manifest themselves in this world. And the religious leaders that he was speaking to, and most of the people, they chose that path. They hated him. They didn't want relationships. They wanted rules. We all want rules if we're just honest. Because rules tells me what? Who's in my tribe? Who's in? Who's out? I can tell by looking at you. I can tell by your Facebook posts. I can tell by the way you dress, where you live. I can tell you're one of us. We want rules. So much so that we'll talk about this next week, that they made it very public. That if you aligned yourself with this new guy who was healing people, no argument about it, healing people, they didn't deny it, doing amazing things, but not in the way and not when they wanted him to do it. They made it public that if you did that, they used religion's greatest weapon. We will kick you out of the synagogue. The entire temple way of life that every Jewish individual got all their purpose, their national narrative, their identity, their societal comforts, everything. You follow that man, you will be kicked out. Some of us haven't thought of that. We'll talk about that next week. So, Jesus, the story goes, passes a man blind since birth. And his disciples were with him, and they have vastly different responses to the man. Jesus, walking by a blind man with his followers, see the same situation, and they have vastly different responses. The disciples, they see an issue. How did this happen? How did this situation come to be this way? What are the factors at play? We need to figure out how this person came to be blind. We need to talk about it amongst ourselves. Was it his fault? Was it his parents' fault? You see, there was this common belief that sin and people's situations were actually just their own fault or handed down as a punishment from God on something their parents did. So look at John 9:2. His disciples asked him, Rabbi, teacher, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he would be born blind? And so here's what they said. I get this. This is so real to me. So if you sense some level of irritation within me, that's a personal thing. I can remember a very specific thing where Michelle and I, in our context as coaches and teachers, had a couple young ladies who were in a poverty situation and had the water turned off at their house. And they were sneaking into school, everything's falling apart. I don't know if you know this, but if you're living in a poverty situation and you lack water and you're 15 and 16-year-old female, I've been told that can be a very traumatic thing. So I go to some people who can make a change, and I go to say, hey, to get some finances. I say, what can we do? And I can tell you that immediately when I brought this up, they began talking about things like politics. They began talking about generational poverty, about enabling the parents, about political reformations. And I want to tell you, some of you guys, I don't want you not to think about that. I want you to consider some of these things. But here's what I want you to know they weren't talking about. Do you know what they weren't talking about? The girls. And I want you to think how many times this has happened to you, where you begin to see something, and you see it, and you see an issue, and you begin to think, and you begin to get upset, and you begin to do all of these things. And I can tell you this, as they did that, I left the room, and guess what I went to do? I went and talked to the city manager, got their water bill set, and went and talked to the girls, and we had a plan. And for all I know, they could still be in that room talking about the issues. I just went to the city, and we found a way to get these high school girls water to bathe. And I want to be very clear. I am not saying that there are not issues to be considered. You guys get that? Like I said, the only way you'll be disappointed with anything I have to say tonight, if you're allowing the Holy Spirit to listen, and I believe this, is if you add things to what I'm saying. I never said that. I'm simply saying that quite often we focus on the problem so much that we lose sight of the person. Is that not true? We focus on the problem so much that we lose sight of the person. And the problems today, the problems that we see that are coming at us all the time, we can't escape. And they seem so huge that we get lost in the complexity of the situation and we lose sight of the simplicity of the solution. I want you to think about that again. When we go on our phones and we go on social media and we start getting mad at how upside down the world is, and we begin to give our heart to how evil this world, that's what we do. Because we give it our thoughts, we give it our emotions, and we give it more of our actions. When we begin to do that, we begin to get caught up in the complexities of all these issues. And we lose sight of the simplicity of the solution, which is just this. I'm just going to give you guys a great strategy that a pastor gave to me. He doesn't know it, because I just read it, but it's beautiful. Do for the one what you wish you could do for everyone. Just going to let that sink in for a minute. Do for the one what you wish you could do for everyone. You see, the disciples, they saw an issue. Jesus saw a need. The disciples saw an issue. Why is this person sick? Well, we can't, we shouldn't, we can't. And again, I want to be clear. If there's one ditch I could fall in and give you, it's this, and I don't mean to do it. We need to show discernment. Can we agree on that? Can we all agree on that? So since we all agree on that, let's just put that aside and let the Holy Spirit course correct us as we desire to show grace and mercy. Okay? I can say that Jesus saw a need. Look at John 9, 3 through 6. Jesus answered, it was neither that this man sinned nor his parents, but it was that the works of God might be displayed in him. There's so much to unpack. I'll just do 10 seconds. We must work the works of him who sent me as long as it is day. Night is coming when no one can work. While I am in the world, I am the light of the world. When he had said this, he spat on the ground, he made clay of the spittle, and he applied clay to his eyes. A couple things, and I'm just going to say it real quick. What he's referring to when he says, I won't be here, is going to actually be the 3 days when he left. The 3 days when he actually left this earth and did some things that are pretty amazing. And I want to say, the reason that's so big is, in those 3 days that Christ was gone, I don't think we understand the darkness that was present so much in this world and the things that were happening. I'll just say that for all of that, and we'll move forward in the story. But see, Jesus wasn't just doing for the one what he wished he could do for everyone. That's for us to do. We are finite. We do for the one what we wish we could do for everyone. Jesus here is doing this amazing thing. He was doing for this one what he had come to offer to everyone. You guys get that? He was doing for this one what he had come to offer for everyone. So think about this. Jesus, who John, that we're studying, starts off and says, Jesus, through whom everything was made, and without him nothing was made, what does he do? What does he do? He actually gives the man vision. He gives the man vision, we're going to see. The gift of light, light from the darkness. And I will just say this. Who wouldn't be excited about that? Who in here wouldn't be excited about some amazing miracle, an amazing mission, an amazing ministry, an amazing person, an amazing thing? All of us. Every single one of us would lack excitement if it didn't fit what we had given our passion and our hearts toward preferring. Do you understand that? If it wasn't what we wanted, we would have a hard time with it. And that's for next week, because the people who idolized their tribe, the religious people, it turned out, the religious people whose thoughts, emotions, and this is next week, and their actions, their hearts centered around their religion, well, they hated him. But I'm going to give you away the ending because it's just beautiful in how amazing it is. You see, they hated Jesus. They hated Jesus because people will go to any lengths to shut down people who are a threat to their tribe. Do you understand that? We all will. Somebody said the other day to me, you don't give challenging enough messages. How am I doing? We okay, Glenn? All right. So they hate Jesus, and here's why. And I want you guys to get this. This is huge, and I wanted to introduce it this week because you need to have a whole week to process this one. Because next week, you probably would have been a Pharisee in these days like me. I would have probably been with the Pharisees when Jesus showed up. I just want to be honest. This is huge, and I want you to get this. When you idolize, and I want you to think about the things you've given your hearts to that more quickly stir your emotions, that more quickly get you to say something, that more quickly get you to activate your passion, right? If it's tribal, if it's protecting your political preference, if it's any of that stuff, I want you to understand this. When you idolize, you will always demonize those on the other side. Think about that. When you idolize, you will always demonize those outside your tribe. And you know what that means? It means you paint them as evil, which validates any action you take against them. And haven't we seen that already? Don't we see that in the world? That if I'm right, if I'm totally right, and I idolize this on either side of the aisle, either side of where you're at, if I am right and I idolize it, this is the thing, I must demonize them, which then means I am free to do anything because they're evil. And we see this all around us, and that's for next week. But I want to give you a week to think about how often we do this. So Jesus, after doing this, after placing the clay, picks up the clay, he spits on the clay, he puts it in the man's eyes, and then he gives this guy a really horrible task. This is just mean. It just seems really unnecessary and actually kind of mean. What does Jesus tell him to go do? Look at the next one, John 9:7. Go, blind man, now with spit in your eye. Find the pool, wash in the pool of Siloam, which is translated sent. So he went and he washed and he came back seeing. See, I think the blind guy thinks there was a lot more he would have added to this than what John wrote. He goes, listen, we weren't even anywhere near the pool. I'm blind. I have no idea where I'm going. I'm asking directions. I'm going down. I'm bumping into stuff. Yeah, oh, Jesus spit. Yeah, I get that. But there's a lot more to the story, but Jesus does it. He actually says, what'd you say? Well, you know what? You want to preach next week? Because I may not be ready. You can almost finish this one. Jesus, I'll say a couple things. A couple things about this we might miss, but the first century audience definitely would not have. Let's just bring this up to date. Jesus used dust, clay, earth to give the man what? Eyes, demonstrating his role in creation. Everything Jesus said and did, I've said, was actually saying something about his purpose or his character. He's associating himself with the creation account. And in healing the man's blindness, you might not know this, I didn't really know it, he was fulfilling Old Testament prophecy. that said the promised one would literally restore blindness. And then what does he do? Jesus, proclaiming that he was sent by God to be the light, illuminating the path back to the Father, he sends this man to a pool which is literally named Sent, where the guy gets his eyesight, regains his vision. But there's also this important parable in action that I'm going to end with, and then we're done. And time for a song, Spence. Which is this, and I want you guys to get it. You find it all the place in the Old Testament and the New Testament. And this is one of those that if you think I'm wrong, I challenge you to consider it for a while. Text me, email me, and I will show you why you are wrong. You ready? God will do it for you, but he won't do it without you. I want you to consider that. God will do it for you. He promises. He promises to close the distance, but man, he won't do it without you. The story of the faithful father, you might have heard it miscalled the story of the prodigal son. Every day the father ran to the gate. Every day, all the kid had to do was walk home and the party was already planned. God will do it for you, but he won't do it without you. Spencer, you guys can come on up because I don't want to waste time. At some point, getting from your current situation to where God has promised to deliver you from the darkness that you're suffering from in whatever area, at some point it's going to take effort. I promise you that. I don't care. In fact, the people in the front row right there that I've counseled in marriage, I always tell you guys, it's going to be really stinking hard. It's going to be really stinking hard. But if you stick it out, if you do the work, if you allow God to actually, Christ, to illuminate the path, and you follow that path, there is freedom from the darkness, but it will take effort. God will do it for you. He won't do it without you. And as we've said in here before, for those of you like, what about grace? Grace is not opposed to effort. Grace is opposed to earning. Two tremendously different concepts. And I will say this, that the path to the promised land that God promises us, it's filled with hurdles and impediments. But here's what the New Testament says. It says every time you throw off these things that are being illuminated in your path, that you have as impediments, that you always go back to, but not this time, that you are running that race, and every time you get rid of them, it says you run the race more fully, getting rid of the things which entangle you. So I'll just say this, and we're done. You know what you're going to find out when you do that? That some of the things right now that you can't believe you're in the middle of, that if you simply allow Christ to illuminate the path back to the Father, and you begin to work on the things right now, putting the effort in, you will find that your present pain right now will one day empower your future ministry. In fact, I want you guys to think about this right now. How many of you in here understand right now that your present ministry has been empowered by some past pain that you went through? Raise your hand if you realize that something you went through has empowered the power you have in your life to speak light into darkness in people's lives. Raise your hands higher than that, because I want you guys to get that. And this is exactly why Jesus said the man was born blind. Look at it, John 9:3. It was neither that this man sinned nor his parents, but it was so that the works of God might be displayed in him. I want you guys to understand that every issue, we're done. Every issue, whether inside of us, because I didn't tell you guys to ignore the issues and focus on nothing. I say this, every issue, whether inside us or around us, is an opportunity for God to be glorified. You guys get that? I don't know. I'll do this. Church, do you get it? Amen. So I know this. Some of those issues you're in right now seem huge. Some of them involve life and death. Some of them involve decisions you've made, darkness you've brought into your own home. I realize some of you guys are in situations that may even just be trivial, you think. And I will tell you this again, each and every situation, whether it's being illuminated in your heart, something you need to deal with, or you can't believe, you can't conceive of moving past it, every issue, including the ones we find ourselves in globally, everything, individually, inside us, and around us. The darkness will never be eliminated around us except that day when Christ returns for his people. In the meantime, he will illuminate the path back to the Father. And every issue that has grabbed your heart is actually an opportunity for God to be glorified.